VMware vSphere with Tanzu Specialist 5V0-23.20 exam updated questions are good and useful for you to take and pass the test. 1. Which statement describes a characteristic of Supervisor Cluster Control Plane VMs? A. Manage the lifecycle of ESXi hosts. B. Are manually created by a vSphere administrator. C. Host developer workloads. D. Run system and infrastructure pods. 2. Which process should be used to upgrade the vSphere with Tanzu Supervisor Cluster? A. Use the vSphere client, navigate to Workload Management, and apply updates. B. Use kubectl, and apply an update manifest specification to the Supervisor Cluster. C. Use the vSphere client, navigate to vSphere Lifecycle Manager, and apply updates. D. Allow vSphere with Tanzu Supervisor Cluster to upgrade automatically when new versions are available. 3. Which two functions are provided by the NSX container rug in NCP? Choose 2. A. Implements Kubernetes ingress with an NSXT Layer 7 load balancer. B. Integrates with container-based POS such as Docker. C. Creates an NSXT logical topology for a Kubernetes cluster and a separate logical network for each Kubernetes namespace. D. Configures overlay transport zones. E. Implements Kubernetes ingress with an NSXT Layer 4 load balancer. 4. How do Tanzu Kubernetes clusters communicate with storage policy-based management to request persistent volumes? A. Through a proxy VM. B. Directly with vCenter server and the underlying ESXi hosts. C. Through the Supervisor Cluster. D. Directly with the vCenter server. 5. Which role should the vSphere administrator apply for the developer? A. Assign the developer user with the can edit role at the vSphere namespace object. B. Assign the developer user with the vSphere Kubernetes manager role at the vSphere namespace object. C. Assign the developer user with the vSphere Kubernetes manager role at the cluster object. D. Assign the developer user with the can edit role at the cluster object. 6. Where are the virtual machine images stored that are used to deploy Tanzu Kubernetes clusters? A. Content library. B. Supervisor Cluster. C. Harbor Image Registry. D. Namespace. 7. How does Kubernetes implement the vSphere storage policy in vSphere with Tanzu? A. Storage class. B. Paravirtual CSL. C. Static persistent volume. D. Persistent volume. 8. Which step in vSphere with Tanzu enablement using the vSphere distributed switch process is done prior to using the Workload Management Enablement Wizard? A. Deploy the load balancer. B. Choose the Kubernetes content library that should be used in the Supervisor Cluster. C. Define the primary workload network (p-range). D. Define the management network interfaces for the Supervisor Cluster. 9. A vSphere administrator is required to provide a developer with read/write permissions on a vSphere namespace. A. It is a Kubernetes cluster deployed by developers using a YAML specification file. B. It aggregates hosts across vSphere clusters to form a Kubernetes cluster on vSphere. C. It enables vSphere high availability and distributed resource scheduler. D. It exposes a Kubernetes API for use by DevOps teams. 10. How can a vSphere administrator replace the Supervisor Cluster API endpoint certificate? A. Use the Certificate Manager CLI utility to replace the Supervisor Cluster API endpoint certificate. B. Use the vSphere client to replace the Workload Platform MTG certificate. C. Use the vSphere client to replace the NSX Load Balancer certificate. D. Use kubectl to replace the Supervisor Cluster API endpoint certificate.